I opened my banking app after the reunion, expecting to see the same balance as always. Instead, it was nearly empty. When I asked what happened, my stepbrother smirked and said they needed the money more than I did. My hands were shaking, but I stayed calm, reaching into my bag because they had no idea what I'd already done or how close everything was to crashing down around them. Before I tell you how that night unfolded and why it ended the way it did, do me a small favor, show a little support for stories like mine by following the channel and leaving a comment about where you're watching from. It helps these experiences reach people who might need to hear them. The reunion had started like every other family gathering, too loud, too crowded, and soaked in a kind of forced cheer that only exists when people are trying to pretend everything is fine. I was 34, single, and considered by my family to be the reliable one. The one with a steady job, no kids, no drama, which, in their language, meant the one who could always be leaned on. The house on Maple Crest Drive was packed. Music hummed in the background, plates clinked, laughter burst out in uneven waves. Monica, my sister, was already settled on the couch with a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone like she was bored at her own reunion. Derek, my stepbrother, hovered near the kitchen, already halfway through a six-pack, acting like he owned the place even though it wasn't his. Mom floated between rooms with a smile that never quite reached her eyes, and Dad sat in his usual chair, half watching TV, half listening to conversations he'd later claim he knew nothing about. I brought what I always did, food, patience, and the quiet assumption that if something went wrong, I'd handle it. I should have known something was off when Monica joked, "Lena's here, so we're good now," like I was a backup generator they just switched on. Everyone laughed. I smiled because that's what I always did. We ate. We talked. We pretended. At some point, Derek slapped me lightly on the shoulder and said, "Good seeing you, sis. You're looking comfortable." The way he said it made my skin crawl, but I brushed it off. I'd been brushing things off for years. It wasn't until I was about to leave that night, standing by the door with my bag over my shoulder, that something made me pause. Derek and Monica exchanged a look. Quick, practiced, almost bored. The kind of look people share when they think they've gotten away with something. I got into my car and sat there for a minute before starting the engine. Out of habit, I opened my banking app. I checked my balance almost every night. Years of being careful had turned it into muscle memory. The number on the screen didn't make sense. I refreshed it. Once. Twice. 3 times. Still wrong. Yesterday, I'd had over $14,000. Enough to feel secure. Enough to breathe. Now, there was barely enough to cover a month's rent. My chest tightened. I felt cold all over. I went back inside. Everyone was still in the living room, laughing like nothing in the world was wrong. I held my phone out and asked, quietly at first, "Did anyone touch my account?" Derek didn't even pretend to be confused. He leaned back against the fridge, beer in hand, and snorted. "Relax. We needed it more than you." The room went quiet, but not shocked quiet, uncomfortable quiet. "You what?" My voice came out thin, like it belonged to someone else. Monica laughed from the couch. "Don't be dramatic. It's not like we stole it. We're family." "You drained my account," I said louder now. "It's not draining if we're paying it back," Derek shrugged. "Eventually." I turned to Mom. "Did you know about this?" She sighed, like I'd just complained about the weather. "Sweetheart, you're always so sensitive. You have a good job. No mortgage. No kids. You're fine." Dad didn't even look up from his phone. "Watch your language," he muttered when I said the word stole. My hands curled into fists. "How did you even get access?" "You left your info on the family computer," Monica said, unapologetic. "Maybe next time don't log in and walk away. Honestly, this is kind of on you." That was the moment something inside me finally snapped. Not loudly, not violently. Quietly. I realized no one was going to apologize. No one felt bad. They didn't even think they'd done anything wrong. I picked up my bag slowly. "I'm leaving." Mom looked surprised. Already? Yeah, I said, zipping my coat. But don't worry. I'll be in touch. Monica rolled her eyes. We needed it more than you. That's just facts. I paused at the door and looked back at them. All of them smiling, relaxed, completely convinced I'd cave, like I always did. Then you won't mind what's coming next, I said. They laughed. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. My cousin Jenna followed me to the driveway. That wasn't right, she said quietly. What they did. I didn't answer. If I spoke, I would have screamed. Driving away, my hand shook on the steering wheel, but my mind was already racing. Not with panic, but with clarity. This wasn't new. It was just the first time it had been this obvious. For years, I'd been the fallback, the safety net, the unspoken solution. It started small, covering a phone bill here, helping with rent there. Then it became expected, assumed, normal. You're lucky, Mom used to say. You don't struggle like your sister does. Family means supporting each other, Dad would add. What they really meant was, you exist to make this easier for us. I never asked for help when I needed it. Not when I was laid off. Not when I skipped vacations to rebuild my savings. Not when I paid off Monica and Derek's credit card debt and never saw a cent returned. And now, sitting alone in my car with my savings nearly wiped out, I understood the truth I'd been avoiding. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource. And that realization was the beginning of the end. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, my phone face down on the nightstand, like it might burn me if I touched it again. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that number on the screen. Almost gone. Years of discipline, of skipped pleasures and quiet sacrifices, erased with a few taps on a keyboard by people who laughed while doing it. Around 3 a.m., I sat up and finally picked up my phone. I opened my banking app again, even though I already knew what I'd see. The balance hadn't magically corrected itself. No error. No reversal. Just the truth, sitting there unbothered. I scrolled through the transaction history slowly, carefully. Each line felt like a small cut. Rent payment, Derek. Utility transfer, Monica. Online purchase, Monica. Cash withdrawal, Derek. Some of them were marked as internal transfer, others labeled as authorized user. My stomach twisted. Authorized. That meant it hadn't been a single mistake. It had been planned. I took screenshots of everything. Then I sat there, phone in hand, and did something I'd never done before. I didn't excuse them. I didn't tell myself they were stressed. I didn't tell myself family helps family. I didn't tell myself I could rebuild it again. For the first time, I let myself be angry. Not explosive anger. Not screaming or crying. Just a deep, steady fury that settled into my chest and stayed there, warming and sharpening my thoughts at the same time. By morning, my phone was full of missed calls. Monica, 3. Derek, 2. Mom, 1. I ignored them all. Instead, I called my bank. The woman on the other end was calm, professional, and, thank God, unemotional. She asked me to confirm dates, amounts, access points. When I told her I hadn't authorized the transfers, there was a pause. Ma'am, she said carefully, I'm going to escalate this to our fraud department. The word fraud felt heavy real. Do I need to file a report? I asked. Yes, she replied. And given the amounts and the access method, you may want to consider a police report as well. I hung up and sat in silence. Police. Fraud. Reports. This wasn't just family drama anymore. It was criminal. 2 days later, Monica finally got through. Lena, please, she said the moment I answered, her voice shaky. We have a problem. I almost laughed. You think? No, I mean something happened. The power company came today. We're way behind. They're threatening to shut everything off if we don't pay by Monday. I closed my eyes. You drained my savings. And now you're asking for more. It wasn't just for us, she snapped, irritation bleeding through the fear. We used some of it to help Mom and Dad too. Dad's car broke down, remember? You didn't ask me, I said flatly. We didn't think you'd mind, she shot back. You always help. There it was. That sentence landed harder than anything else. That's what you're for. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the past 5 years in my head. Every small favor, every casual assumption, every time I'd been praised for being strong while being quietly drained. 3 days later, Mom called. We need to talk, she said. No greeting, no concern. We're planning a family dinner, she continued. Just us. Come over tonight. My stomach sank. What is this really about? You've caused a lot of tension, she replied. I caused it. Still, I went. The house felt colder when I walked in, even though the lights were on and everyone was already there. Monica stood by the window, arms crossed. Derek sat at the table, scrolling on his phone. Mom fussed in the kitchen. Dad flipped through mail like this was any other evening. So, Monica said as soon as I sat down, are we going to act like adults or what? Depends, I replied. Are you ready to admit you committed felony theft? She scoffed. God, you're so extra. It was family money. You didn't have permission, I said. You didn't say no either, she muttered. Because I didn't know. Mom finally spoke. We all agreed you could handle it. Dad nodded. We trusted you to do what's right. I stood up slowly. What's right is asking, not stealing. That word again, Monica snapped. Stop saying steal. We needed it. I reached into my bag. This time, I didn't pull out my phone. I pulled out paper. A printed spreadsheet hit the table with a sharp slap. Itemized charges, dates, amounts. Every transfer highlighted and traced. $700 on makeup, I said calmly. $900 on takeout. $2,300 to pay off Derek's car loan. Derek's face darkened. You went through our accounts. I did more than that, I said, opening my laptop. The screen glowed with neatly organized tabs. I filed a fraud report, and I contacted the authorities. Monica's eyes widened. You didn't. I did. Mom gasped. You called the police? Before anyone could say anything else, there was a knock. 3 heavy knocks. The room froze. Open up, a voice called. Financial Crimes Unit. Derek turned to me, panic creeping into his voice. Lena, tell me you're not serious. I walked to the door and opened it. 3 officers stepped inside. Yes, I said. I'm the one who called. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, no one laughed at me. The room didn't explode into chaos the way movies make it seem. There were no screams at first. No dramatic lunges or sobbing collapses. Just silence, thick, suffocating silence, as the officers stepped fully inside and calmly closed the door behind them. One of them, a tall woman with her hair pulled back tight, glanced at her tablet. Lena Carter? That's me, I said. She nodded. Thank you for your cooperation. We'll take it from here. Monica sank into the chair behind her, like her legs had simply stopped working. Derek stood frozen, hands clenched at his sides, eyes darting between the officers and me, as if this were some elaborate bluff that might still dissolve if he stared hard enough. Mom covered her mouth. Dad didn't move at all. You can't do this, Monica whispered, finally finding her voice. We're family. The officer didn't even look at her. Family status doesn't make unauthorized financial access legal, ma'am. But she always helps, Monica said desperately, pointing at me. She never said we couldn't. I felt something in my chest finally snap cleanly in two, not breaking but separating. I never said you could, I replied, my voice steady. And you knew that. One of the officers turned to Derek. Sir, please remain seated. Derek scoffed, trying to recover his old swagger. This is ridiculous. You're really going to arrest us over helping each other survive. The second officer spoke calmly. You're listed as a party of interest in an ongoing investigation involving unauthorized transfers, identity misuse, and financial fraud. We're not here to debate morality. Mom stepped forward, hands shaking. Please, there must be some mistake. My daughter would never do this to us. I looked at her then. Really looked. You didn't think there was a mistake when they took my money, I said quietly. You just thought it was convenient. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel anything this time. No guilt. No instinct to soften my words. The officers asked Monica and Derek to stand. Monica tried to speak again, her voice cracking into something shrill. You don't understand, she cried. We were drowning. You don't know what it's like to struggle. I met her gaze. I do. I just did it alone. They were escorted out one by one. Dad finally moved, reaching out as if to stop them, but his hand fell back to his side. No one stopped me as I picked up my bag. Ms. Carter, the lead officer said gently, we may need a formal statement later. For now, you're free to go. Free. The word felt strange, heavy, earned. I walked out into the night air without looking back. I didn't watch them being loaded into the car. I didn't wait to hear what charges might stick. I didn't need the details. I just drove. I drove past closed shops, empty intersections, glowing streetlights blurring as tears finally came. Not violent ones, not broken ones. Just quiet tears of release. I ended up somewhere I hadn't planned. My grandmother's old house. She'd passed away 2 years earlier, but I'd kept the key. She used to tell me, if the world ever turns on you, you come here. This door will always open. That night it did. I slept longer than I had in years. When I woke, my phone was full. Missed calls, voicemails, texts. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I made coffee in a chipped mug, stood by the window, and watched the sun climb slowly over the fence she once tended so carefully. For the first time in a long time, my chest didn't feel tight. That peace didn't last. The emails started that afternoon. From Dad. You've humiliated this family. What happened to loyalty? From Monica, they froze my accounts. Derek's job is investigating him. You ruined everything over money. From Mom. In a voicemail I finally played once. We could have handled this privately like a family. I replayed that line again and again. Handled it privately. Meaning, quietly. Meaning without consequences. Meaning with me paying the price. 2 days later, I got a message I didn't expect. From my stepbrother, Evan. We'd never been close. Polite at holidays, nothing more. Just so you know, he wrote, Monica is trying to say you approved the transfers. Lawyers involved. Watch yourself. I stared at the screen, then smiled, a humorless, tired smile. Even now, even cornered, still lying. That night, I called my lawyer. I want everything documented, I said. And I want a restraining order. He didn't hesitate. That's wise. A week later, another message arrived. This one stopped me cold. From Kelly, Derek's sister. I know we've barely spoken, but I need to say this. You were right about all of it. I used to think you were cold. Now I see you were just the only one with boundaries. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. I read it twice. Then I cried, not from pain, but from something like validation. 3 weeks passed. The investigation moved forward. Accounts were frozen. Lawyers got involved. Stories shifted daily. Somehow in all of them I was the villain. I moved anyway. New apartment. New state. New phone number. At work, my focus sharpened without the constant background stress of being someone else's safety net. My boss noticed. I was offered a promotion. I accepted without hesitation. One quiet morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a check for $1,200 and a note written in careful handwriting. I left him. You were right. Watching you stand up gave me the courage to do it too. This is for everything you paid for that no one thanked you for. Thank you for being the example I needed. Kelly. I sat with that letter for a long time. People ask me now if I regret it. The truth? I don't regret standing up. I regret how long I stayed silent. Because the moment I stopped letting them treat me like a resource instead of a person, everything changed. And they were never ready for that. By the 4th week, the silence had changed. At first, it had felt peaceful, like clean air after years of breathing smoke. But now it felt watchful, heavy, as if something was gathering just beyond my line of sight. I knew my family too well to believe they would accept consequences quietly. The first real sign came on a Tuesday morning. I was halfway through my coffee when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I let it ring. Then it rang again, and again. On the 4th call, I answered. "Lena," my mother said, her voice trembling in that carefully controlled way she used when she wanted sympathy without admitting fault. "Please don't hang up." I didn't speak. "We need to talk," she continued. "This has gone too far. Lawyers, investigations, people are talking." "They should," I said flatly. A sharp inhale. "You don't understand what this is doing to your sister." "I understand exactly what it's doing," I replied. "I just don't feel responsible anymore." There it was, the pause where she recalculated. "You've always been so independent," she said softly. "So strong. That's why we leaned on you." "No," I corrected. "You leaned over me." She ignored that. Derek might lose his job. Monica hasn't slept in days. They're terrified. I looked out the window at the quiet street below. So was I when I saw my account drained. "That was different," she said quickly. "This is ruining lives." I finally laughed, a short, humorless sound. Mine was already ruined. "You just didn't notice because it was convenient." She started crying then. Real sobs this time. "Please," she begged. "If you drop the complaint, we can fix this. We'll sit down. Talk like adults." Talk. The same word they'd used every time I tried to set a boundary. "Adults don't steal," I said. "Adults don't laugh when someone realizes their savings are gone. And adults don't ask forgiveness only when consequences arrive." Her voice hardened. "So that's it. You're choosing money over family." I felt the old guilt try to rise, but it didn't reach my chest this time. "No," I said calmly. "I'm choosing myself over being used." I ended the call. 10 minutes later, my father texted. "You've always been dramatic. You'll regret turning your back on us." I stared at the message, then deleted it. That afternoon, my lawyer called. "They're preparing a defense," he said, "claiming you gave verbal permission, that the transfers were mutual support." I wasn't surprised, and it won't hold. We have logs, IP addresses, timestamps, screenshots. But you should be prepared. They may try to shift blame publicly. "Let them," I said. 2 days later, they did. A mutual friend from my hometown messaged me. "Hey, I didn't know if this was true, but Monica said you agreed to help them and then changed your mind and called the authorities out of spite." I felt my jaw tighten. I replied with one sentence. If I agreed, there would be one text proving it. There isn't. The friend didn't respond again. That weekend, I flew back, not to see them, but to finalize paperwork with my attorney in person. I didn't tell anyone I was in town. I should have known better. I was leaving the building when I heard my name. "Lena." I turned. Monica stood across the sidewalk, eyes red, hair pulled back hastily, like she'd come straight from crying. Derek hovered behind her, arms crossed, face tight with barely contained anger. "Of course," I muttered. "We need to talk," Monica said. "No," I replied. "You need to talk to your lawyer." She stepped closer. "Please, just 5 minutes." I looked around. Public place. Daylight. People nearby. "5," I said. She rushed in immediately. "You don't understand what you've done. They froze everything. Our rent bounced. Derek's boss called him in. We're drowning." Derek snorted. "Congratulations. You win." I met his eyes. This was never a game. "You always had more," he snapped. "You didn't need that money." "And you decided that for me?" I asked. Monica grabbed his arm. "Stop, please." She turned back to me, voice shaking. "We'll pay you back. Slowly. We just need you to call this off." I crossed my arms. "You didn't ask when you took it." "We panicked," she said. "You're good with money. You'd bounce back." There it was again. The assumption. The entitlement. "You didn't see me as a sister," I said quietly. "You saw me as insurance." Derek scoffed. "You think you're some kind of hero now." "No," I replied. "I think I'm done." Monica's expression shifted then, from desperation to something sharper. "You know what?" she snapped. "Fine. Keep playing the victim. But don't come crying when you're alone." I smiled sadly. I've been alone for years. I just didn't know it. She looked like she wanted to say more, but Derek pulled her away. As they walked off, he threw one last line over his shoulder. "You'll regret this." I watched them disappear into the crowd, and for the first time I knew he was wrong. The real regret belonged to people who assumed I would never stop giving. That night, back in my new apartment, I opened a fresh notebook. On the first page I wrote, "Things I am no longer responsible for." I filled 3 pages. By the end, my hand didn't shake. The next week, the formal charges were filed. Unauthorized access, financial fraud, identity misuse, no dramatic arrests, no handcuffs, just paperwork, slow, methodical, inevitable. My mother sent one last message. "If this goes to court, don't expect us to protect you." I didn't reply. Protection had never gone both ways. 3 months later, the case was still unfolding. But my life felt lighter than it ever had. No late-night calls asking for help. No guilt-laced emergencies. No reminders that I had it easier and therefore owed more. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on, I realized something that made me laugh out loud. For the first time in my life, no one needed anything from me. And instead of feeling empty, I felt free. But somewhere deep down, I knew this story wasn't finished yet. People who lose control don't always let go quietly. And my family still hadn't learned the most important lesson of all. I wasn't asking for permission anymore. I didn't hear from them for a while after that. And that silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. At first, I let myself believe it meant acceptance. Maybe they were finally realizing I wasn't bluffing. Maybe they were too busy dealing with the fallout to keep circling back to me. I was wrong. It started subtly, the way everything dangerous does. A co-worker pulled me aside one afternoon and asked, almost casually, "Hey, is everything okay with your family?" Someone mentioned there's some legal drama. My stomach tightened. Who mentioned it? She hesitated. "Your sister. She emailed HR, said she was worried about you, said you'd been under a lot of stress lately." Concern. That was their new angle. That night, I received an email from my company's compliance department. Nothing accusatory, just a request for clarification about a personal legal matter that might reflect on financial integrity. I sat on my couch, staring at the screen, anger blooming slow and hot in my chest. They weren't trying to fix things. They were trying to ruin me. I forwarded the email to my lawyer immediately. His reply came back fast. "They're escalating. This is retaliation. Don't engage directly. Document everything." So I did. I documented the texts, the voicemails, the emails sent to people I barely spoke to anymore. My sister painting herself as overwhelmed, my stepbrother as misunderstood, me as unstable and vindictive. It was almost impressive how quickly they rewrote the story. Almost. Then came the letter. Certified mail. No return address. My hands were steady when I opened it. Inside was a formal notice. My parents were contesting ownership of a small investment account that had been set up years ago, one I'd been contributing to quietly since my first job. An account that, somehow, they were now claiming was family managed. I laughed. A real laugh this time. They were grasping. That night, my mother finally showed up at my door. I hadn't told her my address. I stood on the other side of the door, listening to her knock, soft at first, then firmer. "Lena," she called. "I know you're home." I didn't open it. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "Just talk to me." I rested my forehead against the door and closed my eyes. "You shouldn't be here," I said through the wood. "I'm your mother." "And I'm the daughter you let them rob," I replied calmly. Silence. Then, quieter. "We didn't think it would hurt you this much." That sentence did something final inside me. "You didn't think about me at all," I said. "That's the difference." She started crying. Real crying. The kind that once would have broken me. "I'm losing my family," she sobbed. "No," I said softly. "You lost control. That's not the same thing." I walked away from the door. She stayed there a long time. I didn't move until I heard her footsteps retreat. The next morning, my lawyer called. "They've officially filed claims," he said. "Weak ones. But they're hoping to exhaust you." "I won't fold," I replied. "I know," he said. "That's why they're panicking." Weeks passed. Depositions were scheduled. Statements taken. Every lie they told contradicted the last one. My sister claimed I'd offered help verbally. My stepbrother claimed I'd left access intentionally. My parents claimed they assumed consent. Assumption wasn't a defense. Evidence was on my side. Then, one afternoon, the loud bang finally came. Not at their house. At mine. I was home, sorting paperwork, when 3 sharp knocks rattled the door. My heart jumped, but not from fear. From recognition. I opened it. 2 investigators stood there, badges visible, expressions neutral. "Ms. Carter," one asked. "Yes." "We need to ask you a few follow-up questions regarding the financial case involving your family." I stepped aside calmly. "Come in." As they sat at my table, one of them glanced around and said quietly, "You did the right thing reporting this." I nodded. "I know." What they told me confirmed everything. My stepbrother had been moving money for longer than I realized. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. My sister had known. My parents had covered for them. And when they realized I wouldn't cave, they tried to destroy my credibility instead. It backfired. Badly. 2 weeks later, charges were expanded. Not just against my stepbrother, but against my sister as well. My parents weren't charged, but they were officially named as witnesses who had knowledge of unauthorized access. That night, my phone rang. My sister. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "What do you want?" I asked. Her voice was hoarse. "They're charging me too." "I know." "You could stop this," she whispered. "You could tell them it was a misunderstanding." I leaned back against my kitchen counter, eyes closed. "You laughed when I was shaking," I said. "You told me you needed it more than I did." "I was scared," she said. "I didn't think." "No," I interrupted. "You thought. You just didn't care." Silence. Then, barely audible, "I hate you." I smiled sadly. "You hate that I finally stopped letting you use me." She hung up. Months later, the case concluded. No dramatic courtroom showdown. Just documents, rulings, consequences. My stepbrother pled guilty to fraud. My sister took a deal to avoid prison. My parents sold the house. I moved again, this time by choice, not escape. A new city. A smaller place. A quieter life. Sometimes people ask if I miss them. I don't. What I miss is who I used to be, the version of me that believed love meant sacrifice without limits. But I don't want her back. Because the woman I became? She checks her accounts without fear. She locks her doors without guilt. She helps when she chooses and walks away when she must. And every time I hear someone say, "But they're family," I remember the night my account was drained, the laughter in the room, and the moment I finally realized being related doesn't give anyone the right to take from you. And once you understand that, there's no going back. I I thought the worst part was over once the charges were finalized. I was wrong again. What no one tells you is that consequences don't end when the paperwork does. They echo. They crawl into places you didn't expect. They linger in phone calls that never come and silences that feel too intentional. After the legal dust settled, the family didn't disappear the way I imagined they would. They fractured. And fractures cut. It started with my father. He was the last person I expected to reach out. The voicemail came late one night. I was half asleep when my phone buzzed, and for a moment I considered letting it ring out. Something made me listen. "Lena," he said, his voice tired, stripped of its usual authority. "Your mother doesn't know I'm calling. I need you to know this wasn't how I wanted things to end." I sat up slowly, the room dark except for the glow of my phone. "You let it happen," I said after the beep. "That's how it ended." I didn't send it. I deleted it and lay back down, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence I'd earned. 2 days later, I found out he'd moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. My mother stayed with an aunt. My sister bounced between friends. My stepbrother vanished completely after his plea deal. The family unit that once told me I was overreacting couldn't even stand to be in the same room anymore. And somehow, that was supposed to be my fault. At work, things shifted too. Not negatively, just differently. People who barely noticed me before started treating me like I was fragile. Like one wrong question might make me break. I hated that, so I stopped hiding. When someone asked, "Are you okay?" I didn't deflect. "I'm better than I've ever been," I said honestly. And it was true. I had more money now, not because anything was returned, but because nothing was being siphoned off anymore. My savings rebuilt faster than I expected. My stress dropped. My sleep improved. I didn't realize how much weight I'd been carrying until it was gone. One evening, about 3 months after everything ended, I ran into my cousin Jen again. We were both at a grocery store, standing in line with our carts. She looked at me carefully, then said, "They still talk about you, you know." "I figured," I replied. "She says you destroyed the family." I met Jen's eyes. "Do you believe that?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I think the family destroyed itself. You just stopped pretending it hadn't." That was the moment I finally felt seen. Not pitted, not blamed. Seen. Later that night, I went through my old messages, ones I'd archived instead of deleting. Years of subtle manipulation, guilt wrapped in jokes, expectations disguised as compliments. "You're so good with money. You don't need it like we do. You're lucky. Why not share that luck?" I'd believed them. I believed that love meant being endlessly available. I archived the folder permanently and shut my laptop. The next phase of fallout came quietly. Letters. Not angry ones. Not threatening ones. Apologetic ones. My mother wrote first. 6 pages. Handwritten. Every line soaked in regret and denial in equal measure. She apologized for how things got out of hand. She apologized for how hurt I felt. She apologized for the consequences being so severe. She never once apologized for taking my money. My sister's letter was shorter. She said she felt betrayed. She said she never thought I'd go that far. She said she hoped someday I'd understand why she did what she did. I folded both letters carefully and placed them in a drawer. Not to revisit, to remember. Because forgiveness without accountability is just permission. And I wasn't giving permission anymore. Around that time, something unexpected happened. I got invited to speak. It wasn't a stage or an audience. It was a small financial literacy group my coworker ran on weekends. She asked if I'd be willing to talk about boundaries and money within families. I almost said no. Then I remembered how alone I felt when this all started. So I said yes. There were 12 people in that room, all different ages, all different backgrounds, and nearly every single one of them had the same story in different clothes. a sibling who borrowed and never repaid, a parent who felt entitled, a relative who used guilt like currency. When I finished talking, one woman started crying. "I thought I was cruel for saying no," she whispered. "You're not," I said. "You're just done being drained." That night, driving home, I realized something important. This wasn't just about my family. It was about the version of me that had been trained to accept mistreatment as loyalty. And that version was gone. The final confrontation came unexpectedly. I was leaving work late one evening when I saw a familiar car parked across the street. My sister stepped out. She looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner, older. She raised her hand slowly, like she wasn't sure I'd stop. I did. Not because I wanted to talk. Because I wanted closure on my terms. 5 minutes, I said. She nodded quickly. "I didn't think you'd actually do it," she said. "Call the authorities. I thought you'd yell, cry, then cave." "I know," I replied. She swallowed. "We needed it." "No," I said calmly. "You wanted it." She flinched. "I'm drowning now," she said. "Everything's gone. I don't even recognize my life." I studied her face. "This is what drowning actually looks like," I said. "Not the kind you imagined when you took my money." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm your sister." "And I was your bank," I said softly. "You chose which role mattered more." She opened her mouth to argue. I raised my hand. 5 minutes are up. She didn't follow me. She didn't call again. Months passed. A year, eventually. The legal case faded from memory for everyone but me. And even for me, it softened into something distant. I bought a small place of my own. Decorated it slowly. Intentionally. Every item was chosen because I wanted it there. Not because someone needed something from me. On the anniversary of the reunion, the night everything collapsed, I checked my account. Not because I was afraid. Because I could. The number was steady. Growing. Secure. I closed the app and smiled. That night, I slept without dreams. And when I woke up, I knew something with absolute certainty. They took my money once. They would never take my peace again. By the time part 7 began, the noise had finally faded. Not the kind of silence that follows an argument. The sharp, ringing kind, but the deep, settled quiet that comes after you stop expecting anything at all. That was new for me. For most of my life, silence meant danger. It meant someone was upset, keeping score, preparing guilt like a weapon. Silence meant I should reach out first, apologize first, fix something I didn't break. But this silence, this one felt earned. It started on a Sunday morning. I woke up without an alarm, sunlight spilling across the bedroom floor of my new apartment. No missed calls, no unread messages, no knot in my chest telling me I'd forgotten to take care of someone else's emergency. I lay there for a long time, just breathing. Then I laughed. A real laugh. Quiet, surprised, almost disbelieving. Because for the first time, my life wasn't waiting for someone else to collapse. I made coffee slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't check my phone while it brewed. I stood by the window, mug warming my hands, and watched people walk their dogs, jog past, live lives that didn't revolve around managing other adults. I realized something then that hit harder than any confrontation had. I had never actually lived alone before. I had lived without roommates, without partners, without kids, but I had never lived without responsibility that wasn't mine. Even when I was technically independent, I was still tethered, still on call, still expected to absorb the fallout of other people's bad choices. Now, there was nothing pulling at me, and it terrified me just a little. Freedom does that when you're not used to it. The first test came a week later. My mother called. I stared at her name on the screen for a full 30 seconds before answering. "Hello," I said. Her voice sounded softer than I remembered. Careful, like she was speaking through thin ice. "I just wanted to check on you." I didn't respond right away. "I'm fine," I said eventually. "That's good," she replied. That's good." Another pause. "I heard you moved." "Yes, It must be nice, she said. Starting over. It is. She cleared her throat. Your sister isn't doing well. There it was. The old hook, dressed up as concern. I'm sorry to hear that, I said evenly. She's really struggling, my mother continued. She says she doesn't understand how things got so out of control. I closed my eyes. I understand exactly how they did, I replied. She misses you, my mother said quietly. I miss who she pretended to be, I said, not who she actually was. Silence stretched between us. I didn't raise you to turn your back on family, she said at last. I opened my eyes, looking around my apartment, my space, my peace, my life. No, I said calmly. You raised me to sacrifice myself until there was nothing left. I just stopped obeying. She didn't argue. That told me everything. We ended the call politely, coldly, permanently different. I didn't cry afterward. That surprised me most of all. Instead, I went for a walk. The city felt sharper now. Sounds clearer, colors brighter. Or maybe I was just finally present in my own body instead of constantly bracing for impact. Over the next few weeks, I noticed changes I hadn't planned. I spoke up more at work. I stopped over-explaining my decisions. I said no without padding it with apologies. People adjusted. The ones who benefited from my silence noticed first. A co-worker tried to dump extra work on me. Just this once. No, I said. That's not my responsibility. She blinked, startled, then nodded. It turned out the world didn't end when I stopped over-functioning. Who knew? One night, I sat down and did something I'd never done before. I wrote a list. Not of goals. Not of debts. Not of things I owed anyone. I wrote a list of rules. Rules for how people were allowed to treat me. No access to my finances without my explicit permission. No guilt disguised as love. No emergencies that aren't actually emergencies. No, we needed it more than you logic, ever. No staying silent to keep the peace. I taped it inside a drawer. Not for display. For reference. Because I knew myself. I knew that if enough time passed, nostalgia might soften the truth. I refused to let it. The next unexpected moment came from my stepbrother. I hadn't heard from him in months. He'd been the loudest, the most entitled, the one who laughed when my account hit zero. His message was short. They're blaming you for everything. Just thought you should know. I stared at the screen. Then I typed back. They were blaming me long before I stopped letting them. No reply came. And for once, I didn't wait for one. Around that time, I learned the investigation had officially closed. Charges filed. Consequences assigned. I didn't attend any hearings. I didn't follow updates obsessively. I had already gotten what I needed. Not punishment, but separation. Distance. Autonomy. Peace. One evening, I ran into someone who used to know me well. An old friend from college. She hugged me tightly, then stepped back, studying my face. You look different, she said. Different how? Lighter, she replied. Like you're not carrying everyone anymore. I smiled. I'm not. She hesitated. I heard about what happened. With your family. Most people have. A lot of them say you went too far. I met her eyes, calm and steady. And what do you think? She exhaled. I think they're scared you showed them it was possible to say no. That might have been the most accurate thing anyone said to me all year. That night, alone in my apartment, I thought about the version of myself from before. The one who flinched when money came up. The one who felt guilty for having savings. The one who believed love meant endless giving. I didn't hate her, but I would never become her again. Because now I knew the truth. They didn't drain my account because they were desperate. They drained it because they believed they were entitled to me. And entitlement doesn't disappear on its own. It has to be confronted, or cut off, or both. As I turned off the lights and got into bed, I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not sadness, certainty. Whatever came next, more calls, more accusations, more attempts to rewrite the story, I was ready. because I finally understood something they never did. I wasn't the family wallet. I was the family boundary. And boundaries don't beg. They hold. The envelope arrived on an ordinary afternoon. Slipped halfway under my door like it was afraid of being seen. No return address. No name. Just my old last name written in careful, familiar handwriting that made my stomach tighten before I even bent down to pick it up. I didn't open it right away. I stood there holding it, feeling that old reflex rise up, the instinct to brace myself, to prepare to fix whatever problem was about to be handed back to me. Instead, I set it on the counter and walked away. I made tea. I rinsed a mug. I stood by the window and watched the street below, reminding myself that whatever was inside that envelope was no longer an emergency just because someone else decided it was. When I finally opened it, 3 things fell out onto the counter. A long letter, a photocopied notice stamped with bold warning text, and a smaller folded note written in my sister's hurried, uneven scrawl. I sat down. The letter from my mother was exactly what I expected and still exhausting to read. It was full of soft language and careful framing. She wrote about family, about mistakes, about how things had spiraled faster than anyone anticipated. She wrote about stress and fear and how no one ever meant for things to go this far. She wrote about how she always believed I was strong, how she trusted me, how she never imagined that trust would become something I resented. Then I reached the sentence that told me nothing had changed at all. "If you could help just one more time," she wrote, "we might still be able to save the house." There it was, the reason for every word above it. I picked up the foreclosure notice next. The dates were clear. The amounts were clear. The timeline was unforgiving. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a temporary setback. This was the natural end of years of spending money they didn't earn and assuming someone else would absorb the impact. The note from my sister was shorter and sharper, less polished, less restrained. She wrote about how unfair everything was, how the investigation had destroyed their lives, how Seth wasn't sleeping, how Mom cried constantly, how Dad barely spoke, how none of this would have happened if I hadn't taken things so far. At the bottom, she wrote, "You always said family mattered." I folded the papers slowly and placed them back into the envelope. For a moment, just a moment, I felt the pull. Not guilt, exactly. Muscle memory. The old urge to step in, to smooth things over, to be the solution so everyone else could avoid accountability one more time. I stood up and walked to the window again. I thought about the night of the reunion, about the laughter when my balance hit 0, about the way they'd looked at me. Not scared, not apologetic, but certain. Certain I would swallow it. Certain I would stay. Certain I would fix it. If I sent money now, nothing would actually be saved. Not relationships. Not respect. Not the house. I would only be proving that boundaries were temporary and consequences negotiable. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. I explained calmly what I'd received. I told him I wanted a response, but not from me. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want debate. I wanted clarity. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "That's very reasonable and very firm." "That's the point," I replied. The response went out 2 days later on official letterhead. It stated that due to documented financial abuse and ongoing legal matters, all communication would go through counsel only. No funds would be provided. No mediation would take place. Any further attempts to pressure, guilt, or intimidate would be recorded and addressed accordingly. I asked him to include one final sentence. "My client wishes you stability, but not at the cost of her own safety or well-being." The reaction was immediate. Blocked numbers tried to get through. Emails piled up unopened. Voicemails came in waves. Anger replacing pleading. Accusations replacing apologies. I didn't listen to them. I didn't respond. I went to work. I cooked dinner. I slept through the night. A few weeks later, the house was sold. I found out through a public notice my lawyer forwarded to me. I stared at the address for a long time, the place where I learned to be quiet, to be useful, to be grateful for scraps of approval. I expected sadness. What I felt instead was distance, like looking at a place I no longer lived in emotionally long before I ever left physically. My stepbrother tried once more after that. A short message from a new email address. They lost everything. Hope it was worth it. I replied with one sentence. They lost what they spent years gambling with. That was the last time anyone from my family contacted me directly. The silence that followed wasn't tense or waiting. It was complete. I filled my days with things that belonged to me. I rearranged my apartment without worrying about anyone's opinion. I planned a trip without calculating how much I might be asked for later. I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. One night, while cleaning out old boxes, I found a notebook from years ago. Pages of budgets, emergency plans, careful calculations designed to absorb other people's chaos. I flipped through it slowly, recognizing how much of my life had been organized around preventing someone else's collapse. Then I tore it up, not in anger, not dramatically, just thoroughly. A week later, a letter arrived from my cousin, the one who'd followed me outside the reunion that night. She wrote that watching everything unfold had forced her to confront how the family treated me. She said she'd started saying no, that it hadn't gone well, that she felt lighter anyway. Thank you, she wrote, for showing me it was possible. I sat with that letter for a long time, because for the first time, I understood something clearly. Breaking a pattern always looks cruel to the people who benefit from it, but sometimes it quietly gives others permission to stop bleeding too. That night, standing alone in my apartment, I felt something settle into place. Not relief, not triumph, certainty. They could never drain me again. Not my money, not my energy, not my life. I had finally learned the difference between helping and being consumed, and I would never confuse the two again. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to support the channel. Subscribe, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps more people find stories that remind them they're allowed to choose themselves.